President Donald J. Trump. Do you know him? Nice gentleman.
This man, Donald Trump, has the most remarkable story. Rising from real estate mogul to TV reality star.
You're fired.
To the highest office in the land. And I've spent years following it all. The Trump investigation is becoming increasingly engulfed in bitter political infighting and unafraid of upsetting allies. Level here at the White House. Services on a global stage like this. We've got a race. He was impeached twice and acquitted twice while in the White House. He became the first former American president to be convicted of felony crimes. But he's retained a strong base of support and has again become the Republican candidate for president. So, what's behind Donald Trump's popularity? Just listen to this. This was Donald Trump on the day he was sworn into office.
For too long, a small group in our nation's capital has reaped the rewards of government while the people have borne the cost. The establishment protected itself.
Donald Trump paints a picture of a Washington elite that's left ordinary voters behind and offers simple solutions to often very complex problems.
We will build a great wall along the southern border.
Whether it's war, crime, or immigration, he simply promises to sort it all out quicker than anyone else.
I will have that war finished and done and settled before I get to the White House. As president-elect, I will get that done.
He also paints himself as a strong man who's going to crack down hard on America's problems.
Nobody was tougher on Russia in history than Trump.
And watch this now iconic moment after an attempt on his life.
Trump's message is that the leaders of the country have the power to fix the country, but they don't. And they don't do it because they're incompetent or because they're malicious. This message that it can be done, it just requires political will, is one that's incredibly appealing to people who just see problems going on and never getting solved.
Trump is also popular because of his background. He came into politics relatively late in life. He was a well-known New York businessman and starred in The Apprentice. His separation from politics means he can sell himself as an outsider, a stark contrast to politicians like the Clintons and Joe Biden, who have been in the game for decades.
You can't drain the swamp if you're part of the swamp, and Joe Biden and other opponents, many of them are owned, controlled, they're bought, and they're paid for.
The way he speaks and acts, it's all at odds with traditional politicians.
There's something wrong. They're cuckoo. If you don't mind, I'm not going to be nice. You catch a bad hombre. Kamala, you're fired. Get out of here.
And because of this, many of his supporters see him as someone who's not part of a system they're unhappy with.
He's uncorruptible, unbuyable.
Trump real, bro. He don't care what you think about him. He gonna speak his opinion. He gonna tell you what it is.
And Donald Trump plays up to this idea, telling the story of an establishment that's out to get him.
I've been going through a witch hunt for years. Proud political dissident. I am a dissident.
The number one issue in this election, as in most elections, is the economy. With one poll saying it will be very important to 8 in 10 voters when they cast their ballot.
Chicken is way up. Canned fruits are up 27%. Oh, that's terrible.
Inflation has been far worse during the Biden administration than during Trump's time, a point he's used to hammer his opposition.
Kamala Harris is an economy wrecker, job killer in chief.
The inflation has been driven by the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine, driving up fuel prices. But whatever the reason for it, the outcome is the same. Things are just more expensive now than they were under Trump.
Just ultimately, my company was running better when he was in office.
Gas prices.
More widely, Donald Trump draws on fear about jobs, taxes, and about wages. His appeal can be explained most clearly by looking here, the Rust Belt. These states were industry powerhouses in the 20th century. Huge amounts of people here had jobs in coal mining, steelworks, and manufacturing. That was until the 1950s. Recessions and foreign competition meant industry declined and jobs disappeared, a hard truth referenced by Trump at his inauguration.
Rusted out factories scattered like tombstones across the landscape.
Trump promises to be their champion.
Made in the USA.
And it worked in 2016. Key swing states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan all put their trust in a Trump presidency.
He was really talking about trade in terms that people in Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin sympathized with. He was talking about trade as a destructive force.
And it's the same story with his message to farmers.
Very simply, DeSantis sided with the communists in China. I sided with the farmers in America. Does that sound good?
A recurring theme in Trump's speeches about the economy is China, a country he blames for America's manufacturing decline.
Together we will reclaim our nation's destiny as the #1 manufacturing superpower in the world. We will do it, and China won't even be close.
As president, he engaged in a trade war with the country, putting up barriers to Chinese goods entering the US, and he wants to take this further.
So if China or any other country charges us a 100 or 200% tariff or tax, then we will likewise charge them a 100 or 200% tariff or tax in return.
He's not alone in this. President Biden placed a 100% tariff rate on electric vehicles coming from China. But the reality is that this trade war never brought back all those factory jobs.
The reality is that not all of those manufacturing jobs disappeared to other countries. In fact, a lot of those manufacturing jobs disappeared to other parts of the United States. Some of those jobs were also lost to automation.
And then there's his rhetoric around immigration, making this outlandish claim in a speech.
Virtually 100% of the net job creation in the last year has gone to migrants. You know that?
The claim has been debunked as false, but it points to how Trump uses people's economic insecurities to gain support. He's promised to make permanent the tax cuts he brought in as president, which never quite delivered on the economic growth he promised. This time, he's throwing something extra in.
No tax on tips. Do we like that?
A policy so attractive, even Kamala Harris has borrowed it.
And eliminate taxes on tips for service and hospitality workers.
Immigration is another top issue in this election. According to this poll, it's the first time in 2 decades that a majority of Americans would prefer immigration reduced. It's clear why this may draw people to Trump.
Because there's never been a border in the whole world that's leaked like this border.
As President Donald Trump put a strict policy in place at the southern border, where millions of migrants have tried to enter the US over the years. His famous US-Mexico border wall still seems popular among Republicans. They want more border agents, more deportations, and more wall.
Because you're being overrun by criminals. They're not being checked, they're not being vetted, they're taking over our country. They're forming armies in our country.
People view difference ambivalently, and they're often scared by difference. It becomes very easy for somebody to come in and say, oh, look at them, they speak a different language, they wear different clothing, they have different traditions, and therefore they're a threat.
For Trump, this isn't just an economic issue or a logistical issue. He sees migration as a threat to American life and American democracy.
They're poisoning the blood of our country. That's what they've done. Biden's conduct on our border is by any definition a conspiracy to overthrow the United States of America. You know.
Similarities have been drawn between Trump's rhetoric and that of the Great Replacement conspiracy theory.
The idea that political elites are deliberately planning to replace the white populations of these countries with immigrants from the third world who they can control.
It's been peddled by the far right for years, both in the US and Europe, and has been referenced by several extremists.
This, unfortunately, is becoming increasingly mainstream in American life. This is certainly a theory that says immigration is a deliberate scheme to make the country worse.
Projections do suggest that the US will become a majority-minority nation by 2050, meaning non-Hispanic white Americans will become one of the many minority groups in the country. In an interview with Time magazine, Trump said there was a definite anti-white feeling in the US and that it can't be allowed.
So a significant number of white Americans believe that they're the ones being discriminated against and they're the ones who are targets of victimization. This emerged a lot in the 1960s after the civil rights movement in the US. A portion of white Americans feel that they were the ones who were victimized, basically the losers of this process. With immigration and the changing demographics in the country, this perception has intensified.
By the grace of Almighty God.
On religion, Trump frequently references his own Christianity. And he's got the vote of white Catholics and evangelical Christians.
As you know, the radical left is trying to shame Christians, silence you.
One of his most controversial policies in office was a travel ban on 6 majority Muslim countries. It was labeled a Muslim ban, but his administration insisted it was necessary to protect the country from terror threats. The Muslim population continues to increase in the US, with one estimate saying Islam will be the nation's second largest religious group after Christians by 2040. But they still only make up just over 1% of the population. Away from religion, Trump has rejected so-called woke culture. And in the past, he's indulged conspiracy theorists like QAnon.
To a lot of Americans, he seems more open-minded to the truth. The fact that he is open to conspiracy theories in a country where so many people believe in conspiracy theories is one of the things that gives him credibility to millions of Americans that other politicians don't have.
We will make America great again.
It's a phrase that's become part of Trump's identity. And yet this snappy slogan reveals a real fear for many Americans who vote for him, that the US is no longer top dog.
That's what's happening with our country. Everything's embarrassing. You know, we don't win anymore. Laughing stock all over the world.
It taps into a deep sense of humiliation.
Is there any truth behind this? Well, the US is still a world heavyweight when it comes to economic, military, and political might. But a 2024 poll found a majority of American adults were dissatisfied with the nation's global position. Clearly, Trump agrees.
Today we're being laughed at.
People don't see it as the unchallenged victor anymore.
As president, he was all about putting America first.
The United States will forever be a great friend to the world, but we can no longer be taken advantage of.
He withdrew from or renegotiated key trade deals, saying they were not in the interests of the US.
NAFTA, what a disaster. The worst trade deal ever made.
And he's criticized continuing American support for Ukraine.
Takes two to tango, you know.
Trump, from the very beginning, has linked all of America's domestic problems to its supposed loss of international standing.
So, what's behind Trump's popularity?
We are transferring power from Washington, D.C., and giving it back to you, the people.
Ultimately, he positions himself as a champion for the overlooked and the politically abandoned.
I'm doing what's right for you. It's the establishment.
His image is that of a political outsider.
Green New Scam. It's a Green New Scam. It'll be the destruction of our country.
And his demonization of immigrants and his rhetoric around economic decline are also factors.